What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video, and this one is transfer tips for Game Week 16. So I'm going to go through some of the popular players being moved in and out of people's squads and give my opinion on whether they are good moves or not. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a like. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. And with Champions League back tonight, make sure to join Sleeper's free Champions League pick'em game with prizes on offer. Link in the description below, QR code on screen. More on that to come later. So let's start with Alexander Isak, and this is pretty much going to be all positive because I can't really think of too many negative reasons to buying him outside of the usual stuff that you just simply can't afford it, or you've got other transfers that are taking higher priority, which might be the case for your individual team. Outside of that, this just looks like a really good week to buy him. He's absolutely nailed on. The minutes are good. The fixtures are good. He's first choice penalty taker. We've already seen him score plenty of goals and assists so far this season. There's no reason why that won't continue to happen. He's a quality player. The stats are good. They've been good pretty much ever since he's been at Newcastle. There's not really any downsides. In terms of him being nailed, obviously Callum Wilson is starting to get some minutes at the moment, but I just don't really see him as a massive threat to Isak. I think for a while now, Isak has been clearly first choice. Maybe there is an outside chance that over Christmas, when there's a quick turnaround between games, Callum Wilson will start. But even if that happens, I would still expect Isak to start as well. And I think the nice thing for Newcastle is the gap between games. They haven't got any matches over Christmas where there's a 3-day gap. They've always got at least a 4-day gap. So if you look at Game Week 16, so this Saturday, and the next game is the Saturday afterwards, then their match in Game Week 18 is Thursday, then it's Monday, then it's Saturday again. There's no reason why Isak can't start all these matches. And if you look at his recent minutes, Game Weeks 14 to 15 was a fairly quick turnaround. He played 90 minutes in both. If Callum Wilson was anywhere close to being back to his best or fully match fit, surely this was kind of the period to give Isak a little bit of time off, even if that was an early sub rather than him being benched. So I think the signs are really good. In the short term, the fixtures are excellent. Leicester at home right in front of you, Ipswich away in 17, Villa at home in 18. But even longer term, you can hold him for quite a while. Like Man United away and Spurs away in 19-20 on paper, maybe not ideal, but both of those teams don't have rock-solid defences. Then you've got Wolves at home, great fixture, Bournemouth at home, which is okay, and then Southampton away in 23. So I just see him as someone, if you bring him in now, unless you need the money or he goes and picks up an injury or something like that, he's just staying in your team for a little while. And I guess maybe that is one slight downside to Isak. He's not necessarily the best at staying fit for a long period of time. But to be fair to him, last year, he got 27 starts in total. So it's not like he was out for long periods of the season. He has missed a couple of games so far this year. There was doubts going into the Liverpool game, but then he played 90 minutes. So I always like when I'm making these videos to play devil's advocate just to give another point of view. But with Isak, I really don't think there's too many negatives to bringing him in. He just looks like a solid option. If you're thinking about doing it like nearly 200,000 FPL managers already have, go ahead. So with Champions League games kicking off in a few hours, don't forget to join Sleeper's Champions League Pick'em game, which is completely free with prizes on offer. And you can download the app using the link in the description below or scanning the QR code on screen. And for each Champions League prize pool, there is $1,000 worth of prizes up for grabs each match day. As you can see, I'm in the Champions League prize pool 1. You might be in a slightly different one. Either way, there are prizes up for grabs and it's completely free to play. So all you have to do is predict whether it's going to be a home win, an away win, or a draw for each game every match day. It's super quick and easy to do. So I'm going to submit my predictions for Tuesday right now. So I'm going to go for a Dynamo home win against Celtic. Then I'm going to go for a bunch of away wins. I think if Liverpool win, they're pretty much going to finish top 8. So I'm going to put them down. Then Real Madrid to beat Atalanta. And then PSV away as well. So I'm going to go for those 3 away wins. Then we're going to go for home wins for Leverkusen and Salzburg to beat PSG. Sporting away win against Club Brugge. And then, sorry, Aston Villa fans, I'm going to have to go for a Leipzig win, I think. And then Bayern Munich, I think, is pretty obvious for that one. So that's Tuesday's picks. You then have to do exactly the same for Wednesday as well, and I'll do mine a little bit later. And then at the bottom, there's a tiebreaker question as well, just in case someone or more than one person finishes on the same amount of top predictions. And that's just how many total goals across all games. So I'm going to go for 50, and then save that. That's all you have to do. Link in the description below, or scan the QR code on screen to get the Sleeper app downloaded. Completely free, and there's prizes on offer. Give it a go. Get your predictions in before tonight's games. So I feel like I probably don't need to talk about Cole Palmer for too long, but he is the second most transferred in midfielder so far this week. So there are still people out there that don't own him. And I'm sorry for how positive this video has been so far. I will find downsides for some other players in this video, but I can't think of a single reason not to bring Cole Palmer in. I think money no object, Salah is clearly the best premium midfielder to own right now. But when you factor in that Palmer is over 2 million cheaper, that feels like extremely good value. And this is not a massive knee-jerk based off the Spurs game, because let's be honest, any of us that own Palmer for that game, especially those of us that captain, did get a bit lucky. It's not that often you get 2 penalties in a game, but he does have penalties. That's one of the upsides, and he's never going to give them away like Saka does. But more importantly, and this is why I think you just got to bring him in if you don't have him, his underlying numbers are extremely good. 0.45 non-penalty expected goals per 90, 0.25 expected assists. I really like that his underlying numbers are skewed more towards goals than assists, similar to someone like Salah. So if we look at the stats for Salah as a comparison, his numbers so far this year are a bit higher in terms of goal threat, 0.51, but his assists are slightly down. So Salah's still slightly better overall, but Palmer is so close. Now, obviously, this is a small sample size, 14, 15 game weeks so far, but we saw how well Palmer also did last year. When you compare him to Saka, who is also still a great premium option, his numbers are skewed more towards assists. So it's 0.23 non-penalty expected goals. So he's got almost half the goal threat from open play that Palmer has so far this season, and 0.41 expected assists. So he's a bit more creative. So Saka, for me, is clearly the third best premium and not in the top 2 along with Salah and Palmer. So when you've got a player that's just so close to Salah in terms of stats, he's got the penalties, he's absolutely nailed on, the minutes are great, he's being rested in Europe every single week because he's not in the squad for that, I just can't see any reason not to get him. And look, he has scored 0.76 goals per 90 compared to 0.45 non-penalty XG. So there is a bit of, I guess you could say, overperformance because of the penalties, but he's got that in his locker as well. So the points per match might come down a bit, but not to a level where he's not a ridiculous option. And the fixture run for Chelsea is so good, I feel like he's got to come in. So Ollie Watkins was benched against Southampton in game week 15. Although he was a little bit unlucky not to return off the bench, he did pretty well, but that has caused over 100,000 FPL managers to sell him before Forest away in game week 16. Now, I think with Watkins, because we expect him to start most games, he's never going to be that player in your squad that you've absolutely got to get rid of. And I certainly wouldn't take a hit to do it. But I think if I had the spare transfer, I would be looking to let go of him. I think at 9 million, he's not super cheap. Don't get me wrong, right? Someone like Isak is not massively cheaper either, right? It's only 0.4 million. But with Isak, you've got really great fixtures for quite a while. Whereas with Watkins, you've got Forest away, which is not necessarily an easy fixture. Forest have started to ship a few goals recently. 3 to Newcastle, 3 to Arsenal, 3 to City. Even though Man United lost, they still scored 2 goals in that game. But Forest away is not an amazing fixture on paper. Then you've got City at home. Again, not the worst time to play them, but still not an easy fixture. Then it's away to Newcastle in game week 18. I think with Isak, you've just got Leicester, Ipswich and Villa at home right in front of you, and pretty decent long-term fixtures as well. The other thing that worries me with Watkins a little bit is the minutes recently. So it's not just the benching in game week 15. It was only 64 minutes against Brentford. So he only played 64 and then still got benched the next game. It was 83 and 90 the 2 games before that. But against Liverpool, again, it was 64. So he's not that same 90-minute man pretty much every single week like he was last season. I guess in terms of where he's got better is he did take the last penalty, right? So he may well take the next one as well. But he doesn't have the greatest record. I don't think he's a brilliant penalty taker. So if he misses, he could be taken back off them again. Whereas I think with Isak, you've definitely got them in your locker. Even if he misses one, he'll almost certainly take the next one again. So I think this is a pretty good jump-off point for Watkins. The other thing that would slightly concern me is, will he get another rest over Christmas like that Southampton game? Now, I'm not so sure it's as likely to happen because, again, the gap between games is pretty good. So they play City on Saturday, Newcastle on Thursday, then Brighton on Monday. And then the next game after that is the following Saturday. So the gaps are pretty good. And obviously none of those games are as easy as Southampton at home is. But Duran is always knocking on the door, right? Every time he plays, or at least it feels like it, he scores. So if Unai Emery wants to give Watkins a couple of early subs or to bench him for one of those games, he may well take the chance to do it. And I just don't think that's something you necessarily want to have to worry about. For what it's worth, I think in the long term, the fixtures are pretty good. Like 19 and 20 is Brighton at home, Leicester at home. It's Everton away in 21. Arsenal away in 22 is tough. But then it's West Ham at home, Wolves away, Ipswich at home. But I'm just not convinced he's good enough to hold on to for that long. Like, I think the really good fixtures start from that Leicester game, which is still 5 game weeks away. So I've said this for weeks now. I just think at 9 million, Watkins doesn't represent great value. And that doesn't mean he's a bad pick. He's put out 5.1 points per match so far this year. I'm sure he'll continue ticking over because his numbers are 0.62 expected goals per 90, which is excellent. I just don't. I feel like if you've got the spare transfer, I would probably look to move it on. So with William Saliba, I do find it quite funny that up until the last 2 game weeks, he literally had 0 XG, not a single shot, and then all of a sudden, Gabriel is out of the team, and he's got 2 goals, one of which he didn't even know about. It just hit him and went in. I guess it's easier to laugh about because I owned him for those 2 weeks, but it just shows that sometimes in FPL, you just need that little bit of luck. I don't think it's completely lucky, by the way, that Saliba has scored a goal, right? He has done that previously. I know Gabriel is the key man, but if we look at previous seasons, it was 2 goals last year, 2 goals the season before that. So he does have a bit of goal-scoring pedigree in him. Is that likely to continue? Not necessarily, but I guess the longer Gabriel is out, the more so other players have to take up that mantle of trying to score from those set pieces, which are so good, by the way. In particular, Saka's delivery is excellent. Nothing to take away from Rice on the other side, but Saka is so good at taking those corners. So they're always going to be a massive threat. Is Saliba worth buying? In general, I think it's still worth looking at Arsenal defenders. Everton at home, Palace away, Ipswich at home. Next 3 are pretty good. I've mentioned previously, I think even in yesterday's video, that long term, although the fixtures get a little bit worse from 19 onwards, I think because of how good the Arsenal defence is, you can hold on to them for a long time. I think the only other defenders I'd maybe look at getting from like 18, 19 onwards instead is probably Liverpool defenders. So Saliba's still good. He went up in price last night to 6.2 million. I still think if I was buying now, I would go for Timber, despite the fact that Saliba has scored 2 goals in 2 games. Let's not also forget that Timber scored recently as well. So it's not like, he's a complete slouch. Is the wrong word probably. When it comes, like a slouch when it comes to attacking returns. That's a really terrible way of phrasing it. What I'm saying is he can get attacking returns as well. And he's getting decent minutes at the moment. Now, when I got Saliba, I didn't instantly regret it, but I did feel like I should have gone for Timber. Obviously, now I'm sitting here with more points, happy that I did it. But it's a 0.6 million difference. That money can be very useful. I'm telling you right now, for my team, I wish I had an extra 0.6 million right now. It would make it a lot easier to get the players that I want. Whereas instead, I'm constantly watching price changes, hoping that certain players don't go up and down in price. So I just think, even if you don't need the money right now, you will need it at some point. And I just don't know if Saliba is worth that 0.6 million more. The one thing that Saliba probably does have over Timber is guaranteed minutes and probably a slightly better record when it comes to injuries and stuff like that. But I think to give props to Timber, like he was out with an injury that keeps you out for a long time. We can't keep, holding that against him. And this year, yes, he's missed a couple of games, but he has put in really good minutes outside of that. I think as long as he can stay fit, he will continue to start with Ben White out. And obviously, Canafori's got issues as well. So Timber's either going to play left back or right back. I think ideally you want him in that right back role when it comes to like attacking returns and stuff like that. But either way, you're going to pick up those clean sheets for less money than Gabriel, who we don't even know if he's fit at the moment, and Saliba. So I think I can't sit here and say that Saliba's a bad option because he's not. Right, he's an absolutely nailed-on attacker. Sorry, nailed-on defender for one of the best defences in the league. But I just think that in the short term where you really want Arsenal defenders, you should probably just spend less money. And I think saving that 0.6 is worthwhile. So Emil Smith-Rowe fell in price last night from 5.6 to 5.5 million. So he's back to his starting price, and that's been caused because over 100,000 FPL managers have sold him before Liverpool away in game week 16. My general feeling with Smith-Rowe is if you can bench him this week because your 7 other attackers are looking good, I would probably lean more towards holding on to him because I quite like the fixtures that Fulham have got coming up. So Southampton at home in 17, Chelsea away in 18 is not ideal either. But after that, you've got Bournemouth at home, Ipswich at home, and West Ham away. And then even after West Ham away in 21, it's Leicester away in 22. So I think that looks pretty good. And overall, yes, there's some decent midfielders in and around that price. Like Semenyo is only a little bit more expensive. Enzo Fernandez is doing really well right now. But I'm not convinced that's a position you want to spend a huge amount of transfers on. I think most of the time, there'll be more impactful moves that you can make. If doing Smith-Rowe to Enzo Fernandez frees up the money to make a bigger move elsewhere that you really want to do, then you could maybe look at moving him. But I'd really want to play him for that Southampton game. Now, minutes-wise, I think the fact that he came off before the 60th minute against Arsenal in 15 has got a lot of people worried. He only played 70 against Brighton. Back in game week 12 against Wolves, it was only 58. But there's still a few games in there where he's played 80-plus minutes. I think we could see that again. I guess the only slight problem you've got is the games over Christmas. We've just seen him come off early when you've had a couple of games in quick succession. That could happen again. But the fixtures are so good, I'm not sure I would particularly worry about it. Like that Southampton game is 8 days after the Liverpool game. So presumably he's going to start that one. Then you've got 4 days later Chelsea, then 3 days later Bournemouth. So maybe Chelsea-Bournemouth, there could be limited minutes. But Bournemouth at home is not terrible. And then Ipswich at home is a week later for Fulham. So that's actually not that bad in game week 20. So look, as always, right, caveats apply. If you're sat there with a few free transfers stored up, nothing else to do, then I think moving Smith-Rowe on is fine, right? He's not essential by any means. But I think with the fixtures they've got, there is an argument to hold on to him. It's frustrating that he's dropping in price, I get it. The underlying numbers don't look amazing overall. 0.18 expected goals per 90, 0.11 expected assists. But I think some of that has been impacted by recent fixtures. Like he's put up 0xG in each of the last 4 games. Not great when you've played Wolves at home, but Spurs away, Brighton at home, Arsenal at home aren't exactly amazing fixtures. And there are previous games this season where he's done really well. 0.34 against Everton, 0.41 against Newcastle at home, 0.53 against Leicester at home. I still think there's something that he offers. So I would probably be getting a little bit concerned if I was an owner, but the fixtures would give me a little bit of hope. And I don't think there's any chance of him getting dropped or anything like that. If you're a Fulham fan and think that's wrong, let me know in the comments below. But I think he'll continue starting. With Semenyo, by the way, like he is good and he's still on my watch list because I might want to downgrade a midfielder soon to get money for other moves. But I don't think he's necessarily an amazing long-term option. You've probably got 5 game weeks out of him now, and then the fixtures get a bit rougher. So West Ham at home, Man United away, Palace at home, Fulham away, Everton at home with the next 5. 2 away games against Man United and Fulham, not necessarily ideal, although I'm sure Bournemouth will cause Man United some problems. And then from 21 onwards, it's Chelsea away, Newcastle away, Forest at home, Liverpool at home. So I would rather have Semenyo right now than Smith-Rowe. But it's not like he's a player you're putting in and necessarily wanting to hold on to any longer. And you've got to pay a bit more for the pleasure. So I think Smith-Rowe is probably okay if you can bench him this week. And ideally, if you can bench him in 18. So Mazraoui, who's been one of the better performers under Amorim since he came into Man United, was benched at the weekend. And that has caused a few people to start to sell him. So he's been sold by just over 60,000 FPL managers. Now, if he's your 4th or 5th defender, I don't think you need to panic too much for game week 16 because you probably weren't looking to play him for Man City away anyway. But obviously, this is now a concern moving forward because you can't guarantee the starts from him. And even when he does start, he's not necessarily immune from having those early subs as well. So if we look at his recent minutes, back in game week 13, he started against Everton but was bought off on the 55th minute. Then he starts against Arsenal, then he's benched against Nottingham Forest. I just think this is another indication that we should be avoiding buying Man United players right now. The only players I'm confident will start every single game are Onana and Fernandez. And even Fernandez has been brought off a couple of times earlier than we'd usually expect. There's just too much experimenting going on. There's too many fixtures in quick succession, and Amorim is still trying to figure out what the best 11 is. For what it's worth, I think there's a good argument to be made that Mazraoui is part of that best 11, but I don't think it necessarily means, as we've just seen, that he starts every single game. So if we look at the lineup against Forest, it was Amadialo right wing back, who's played really well, Dalot left wing back, and I think both of those players will be in more often than not. I think Mazraoui can play one of those roles, but you've got to get rid of one of those two players. And so, by saying that, there's competition there. The position that he's mostly been playing is right centre back. Yoro came in, and he's someone that's highly rated, right? So they want to get him in the team more often than not when they can. De Ligt is central centre back. Even if he comes out of the team, that's not where Mazraoui is going to play. The one position he might get into is left centre back. Because I don't think Martinez has been particularly great and Luke Shaw is injured. But obviously then you're bringing in a left footer to play... Sorry, you're bringing in a right footer to play in a left centre back role, which is not necessarily ideal. So I think when you get a chance to sell Mazraoui, you should probably take it. And I certainly wouldn't be buying him right now. And also, I think over the next 5 game weeks, the only 2 fixtures you'd really want to play him in anyway are probably Bournemouth at home and Wolves away. And Bournemouth, like I just said, will cause Man United some problems. Newcastle at home in 19 is not terrible. But again, I would expect Newcastle to score. So definitely don't buy Mazraoui now. I think we've seen enough where he has to be avoided. And in terms of keeping hold of him, that if he's 4th, 5th defender, no rush. But if you're going to have to play him regularly, I think there's probably better options to go for. Now, he's 4.7 million. Some of you might have picked him up a little bit cheaper than that. Just to quickly go through cheaper defenders again, because I feel like I'm probably going to mention it other times this week. I would probably, let's just go to 5 million or under. I would avoid Aina. I just don't think the fixtures are good enough for clean sheets coming up. Not terrible, like if you had to play him against Villa, Brentford, Everton, it's not awful. I don't think this is the right time to buy a Forest defender. Also, he's a bit more expensive. Ashley Young, who's done really well. Everton's fixtures are terrible. Munoz, 4.7. I don't hate as a longer-term move, but he's on 4 yellow cards. I really, as boring as it sounds, I'd probably go for Colwill if I was buying this week. He's 4.5 million. I can't actually find it. He scored so few points, he's not that high up the list. But the fixtures coming up for Chelsea are decent, and the defence is good as well. He's a very boring pick, but that's probably where I would go. If you want a bit more excitement in your life, which I absolutely get, I would go for Lewis Hall. People are going to ask me whether he's absolutely nailed on. I still am a bit afraid to say he's 100% nailed, but he is regularly starting. Botman apparently is going to make an appearance for like the under-21s or something soon, but it's going to take him a bit of time to be back in that 11 permanently. And the reason that matters is because when Botman is in, we could see Dan Burn go to left back. But I think Lewis Hall has played enough games now and played well enough where he probably will continue to start. And I'm not too concerned about Trippier being back and Livramento playing left back. I just don't think that's going to happen. I actually just think it's going to be a struggle for Trippier to get in ahead of Livramento at right back. So Lewis Hall is the exciting pick. I don't think there's any other like 4.5s I would buy this week. Maybe Kirkes, who's 4.6 for Bournemouth, because their defence is pretty decent as well. They got some nice fixtures you could play him in. And a bit different to Semenyo, because he's so cheap. You could bench him for like Chelsea, Newcastle, 21, 22, then play him against Forest in 23, Southampton away in 25. So I don't mind Kirkes either. But the thing with Kirkes is, I would see Chelsea defence as better. So I think more clean sheets are likely from Chelsea rather than Bournemouth. And in terms of his attacking numbers, they're fine, 0.11 expected goal involvement, but Lewis Hall's are better, 0.15. I guess Bournemouth defence is maybe slightly better than Newcastle, but there's not a lot in it. I'm not sure I'd be buying Kirkes. I just feel like I'd want Hall or Colwill instead. Either way, if I've got Mazraoui, I think he's a little bit of a problem moving forward, not so much if he's 4th or 5th defender. So Cunha blank for the 3rd game week in a row, and that has caused some people to start talking about selling him. I'm not sure if they're being completely serious, but I have seen some talk of that. And actually, just over 50,000 FPL managers have already sold him this week before Ipswich at home. It's worth saying that just over 50,000 FPL managers have already brought him in too, so it has evened out a little bit. But there are people selling before Ipswich at home and Leicester away, and it makes absolutely no sense to me. this is one of those moves that I would spend zero thinking time on this week. You keep him for Ipswich at home, you keep him for Leicester away, and then you decide what to do with him. It's perfectly fine if you want to start thinking about your long-term move for him, but I just don't see any point in wasting brain power on removing him before Ipswich at home. And don't get me wrong, right? If you bought him in after that 4-game week period where he got like over 40 points, you've had nothing since, that is frustrating. But these are the money fixtures, Ipswich at home and Leicester away. So for me, he's an easy hold. And I did say after 4 game weeks, right? And the reaction will be met a bit differently now. He was overperforming, right? So it's not a complete surprise that the returns have dried up a little bit, but it doesn't mean he's a bad option either. Just because a player overperforms can still mean that they're decent going forward. And I think if you picked up Cunha for Bournemouth at home, Everton away, West Ham away, it wasn't necessarily a bad move. You just got him at the wrong time, and that can happen in FPL. Like basically, he got between game weeks 9 and 12, he got 7 returns, 4 goals, 7 assists. Had he got 7 returns over 7 game weeks, it would have felt a little bit better. It just doesn't feel great because the last 3 have been blanks, but he's got to stay. I mean, the numbers are not great recently, by the way. 0.11 XG versus Bournemouth, 0.09 versus Everton, 0.04 against West Ham. But I don't think that's a complete shock. His expected goal numbers over the season are not that high, 0.23. The reason that he was a good option is because of the fixtures, of which he's still got 2 of the good ones left, and also his expected assists are not bad. So overall, his expected goal involvement's okay, and he always plays 90, and he's most likely to take a penalty when Wolves get one as well. And by the way, last night they were unlucky not to get a penalty for that one where, I can't remember who it was, but one of the West Ham defenders stood on a Wolves player's foot. The referee didn't give it, and VAR didn't overturn it. Had it been the other way around, the referee gave it, I think VAR also wouldn't have overturned it and it would have stood. So you can probably consider yourselves a little bit unlucky he didn't get a penalty. And if he did and he scored it, no one would be thinking about removing him. So it's just an easy hold. Ipswich at home, give him Leicester away as well, and then decide what to do. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed that, make sure to give it a like and hit that subscribe button. Rate 5 stars if you're listening on podcast. And don't forget to check out Sleepers Champions League Pick'em game, completely free, prizes on offer, link in the description below. Or you can rewind back and use the QR code on screen to get it downloaded. I'll be back tomorrow for the game week preview, so I'll catch you then.